Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Sunday, May 3rd, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today is quite mild, with a high of 69.6 degrees and a low of 57.3. It is a notable Sunday as we observe World Press Freedom Day and celebrate Orthodox Easter. In today's episode, we will examine the current confusion surrounding access to abortion medication following a recent court decision. We will also explore the way Donald Trump has influenced the race to replace Mitch McConnell as Senate leader. We have a few other minor stories to cover as well to ensure you are fully caught up on the events of the day. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning, everyone. We're starting today with a major story shaking up reproductive health care across the country. A federal appeals court ruling late last week has thrown access to abortion pills into what one drug manufacturer is calling, quote, regulatory chaos, end quote. To help us sort through what's happening, we're joined by our reporter, Ethan. Ethan, good morning.
Good morning, Grace. Yeah, this is a fast-moving and frankly confusing situation. As of this morning, May 3rd, 2026, the legal landscape around medication abortion is genuinely in flux. At the center of it all is mifepristone, the first drug in the standard two-pill abortion regimen. And what we're really watching is a constitutional clash between federal regulators and individual states.
So walk us through what actually happened on Friday. What did this court decide?
So on Friday, May 1st, just 2 days ago, a 3-judge panel of the New Orleans-based 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals issued a unanimous 18-page ruling. The court reinstated strict in-person dispensing requirements for mifepristone. In plain terms, that effectively bans mailing the drug and bans distributing it through telehealth or certified pharmacies. According to PBS NewsHour and the BBC, the ruling overrides Food and Drug Administration regulations that have been on the books since 2021.
And what was the court's reasoning? How did the judges justify going after the FDA like this?
The opinion was penned by Judge Stuart Kyle Duncan, and his logic is pretty striking. He argued that the FDA's expansion of mail-order access, quote, opened the door, end quote, for the drug to subvert state-level abortion bans. The court held that every abortion facilitated by the FDA's actions in a state like Louisiana effectively, quote, canceled, end quote, that state's policy that an unborn child is a legal person from the moment of conception. So it's really a sovereignty argument dressed in regulatory clothing.
That's a big leap, telling a federal agency it can't override state policy. How did the drug makers respond?
Almost immediately. The two manufacturers, Danco Laboratories, which makes the brand name Mifeprex, and GenBio Pro, which makes the generic version, raced to the U.S. Supreme Court. SCOTUS blog and ABC News report they filed emergency applications on Saturday, May 2nd, asking the justices for an administrative stay to block the Fifth Circuit's decision while the case continues. Danco said the ruling, quote, injects immediate confusion and upheaval into highly time-sensitive medical decisions, end quote. And GenBio Pro warned of, quote, unleashed regulatory chaos, end quote.
So the ball is in the Supreme Court's hands now. Has any justice acted yet?
Not as of this morning. Justice Samuel Alito oversees emergency matters from the Fifth Circuit, and he has not yet acted on these requests. Legal analysts say he could issue a temporary administrative stay to preserve the status quo, or he could refer the matter to the full court. Either way, we could see movement at any moment, and pharmacies, telehealth providers, and patients are essentially in limbo waiting.
Now, I remember a similar case a couple of years back that went nowhere at the Supreme Court. Why is this one different?
Great question, and that's really the key to this whole story. Back in 2024, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled in FDA versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine that a group of anti-abortion doctors lacked standing. They couldn't prove they were personally harmed by the drug being available. So this new case, called State of Louisiana versus FDA, was deliberately designed to bypass that hurdle. SCOTUS blog and PBS NewsHour have laid out the new strategy in detail.
And what's the new legal theory they're using?
It's called Sovereign and Financial Standing, and Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill filed the suit in October of 2025. She brought what she calls hard evidence, $92,000 in Medicaid costs paid by Louisiana in 2025, for emergency care for two women who suffered complications from mail-order pills obtained out of state. The state also argued the FDA's rules interfered with its sovereign power to enforce its total abortion ban. And there's an individual plaintiff, too.
Tell us about that plaintiff. That seems important.
Her name is Rosalie Marcus-Sate. She joined the suit alleging she was coerced by her boyfriend into taking abortion drugs that were obtained through the U.S. Postal Service from a doctor in California. So you have three legs to the standing argument: financial harm to the state through Medicaid, sovereign interference, and an individual harmed party. That combination is what got the case past the procedural barriers that killed the previous lawsuit.
Let's talk about the science the court relied on, because I understand that's been controversial.
Very controversial. The Fifth Circuit's ruling leaned heavily on data that the mainstream medical community sharply disputes. According to The Guardian and the Guttmacher Institute, the court cited a 2025 report from the Ethics and Public Policy Center, the EPPC, claiming a 10.93% serious adverse event rate. That's a figure 22 times higher than the FDA's data, and major medical groups have called that report, quote, junk science, end quote.
22 times higher? How do they get to a number like that?
Well, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, and the American Medical Association, the AMA, both point out that the EPPC study was not peer-reviewed. It also counted things like routine follow-up visits and expected cramping as, quote, serious adverse events, end quote. The court also relied on miscoding research by James Studnicki and the Charlotte Lozier Institute. And here's the kicker. Studnicki's previous studies were retracted by Sage Journals in 2024 for, quote, fundamental problems with study design, end quote, and, quote, analytic bias, end quote.
So what does the actual peer-reviewed science say?
Peer-reviewed studies in JAMA and The Lancet maintain that mifepristone is safer than common drugs like penicillin or Viagra. They put the serious complication rate at less than 1%. Major medical organizations continue to assert the drug is 95% effective and safe for use through the 10th week of pregnancy. So there's a real gulf between what the courts cited and what the medical establishment says.
Help us understand the scale here. How many people actually rely on these pills?
It's enormous. The BBC reports that medication abortion now accounts for approximately 63% of all abortions in the United States. And 1 in 4 are prescribed via telehealth. So when you cut off mailing and telehealth, you are restricting the most common method of abortion in the country. That's why this is being viewed as the most significant restriction on abortion since the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade.
And this affects states where abortion is still legal too, right?
Exactly, and that's a crucial point. The Fifth Circuit's order is currently in effect nationwide, so mail-order access is restricted even in states where abortion remains legal. That puts a huge spotlight on what are called shield laws in Democratic-led states. Those laws were designed to protect providers who mail pills into states with bans. Those shield laws are now facing direct tests in civil and criminal cases in Louisiana and Texas.
Let's turn to the politics, because this is landing right before an election.
The timing really is explosive. PBS NewsHour notes the case is likely to make abortion a central issue in the upcoming 2026 midterm elections. On one side, anti-abortion advocates like Marjorie Dannenfelser of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America hailed the ruling as a victory for, quote, victims of the mail-order drug regime, end quote. Democrats, on the other hand, are preparing to use the chaos as a rallying cry to try to regain control of the House.
And I understand there's even tension within the Republican Party on this?
There is. Some anti-abortion advocates have criticized President Trump because the FDA approved a generic version of mifepristone during his administration. They've called his inaction, quote, shameful, end quote. So this isn't a clean partisan divide. And on top of that, the Trump administration is currently conducting an internal FDA review of mifepristone's safety, led by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That review could provide further justification for permanent restrictions down the road.
So bottom line, Where do things stand for someone trying to access this medication today?
As of this morning, mail-order and telehealth distribution of mifepristone are technically suspended nationwide by the Fifth Circuit's order. Emergency applications from Danco and GenBio Pro are pending before Justice Alito. The FDA review under Secretary Kennedy is ongoing. And major medical organizations continue to insist the drug is safe and effective. So patients, providers, and pharmacies are all watching the Supreme Court for any sign of movement, possibly within hours or days.
A genuinely fluid story. Ethan, thank you for breaking it all down for us this morning.
Happy to, Grace. We'll keep tracking it.
And now to our second story this morning, a major shakeup in the race to replace retiring Senator Mitch McConnell down in Kentucky. President Donald Trump has thrown his weight behind a single candidate, and it's already reshaping the primary. For more, we're joined by our political reporter, Chloe. Chloe, good morning. Set the stage for us.
Good morning, Grace. So just 2 days ago, on May 1st, Trump officially endorsed U.S. Representative Andy Barr for that Kentucky Senate seat. According to the Lexington Herald-Leader and the Chattanooga Times-Free Press, the announcement came in a Friday evening Truth Social post. And it wasn't just an endorsement. Trump simultaneously cleared the field by asking another major candidate to step aside. The whole move has essentially anointed Barr as the heavy favorite heading into the May 19th primary, just 16 days from today.
Wait, he asked someone to drop out? Who and what did he offer?
Yes, the candidate was entrepreneur Nate Morris, who'd been running a populist MAGA-aligned campaign. Trump offered him an ambassadorship in his administration as an off-ramp. Morris immediately withdrew and threw his support to Barr. And that matters because Morris had previously secured backing from figures like J.D. Vance, and polling from Emerson College and Qantas Insights showed him holding roughly 15% of the vote. Analysts told CNN and WHAS 11 this was the result of weeks of private maneuvering to give Barr a clean path.
So why Barr? What did Trump get in return for that endorsement?
According to Trump's public statements, the big driver was Barr's commitment to passing something called the Save America Act. The official name, as reported by the Washington Post and the New York Times, is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It would dramatically overhaul federal election standards. We're talking about requiring documentary proof of citizenship for voter registration, a mandated national photo ID for all federal voting, and integration with the Department of Homeland Security's SAVE database. There are also potential criminal penalties for election officials who don't comply.
That sounds sweeping. What would documentary proof of citizenship actually mean for voters?
It would essentially require physical documentation, like a passport or birth certificate, to register. That effectively bans mail-in or online registration methods that don't include physical verification. And here's the really significant part, Grace. Trump explicitly praised Barr for being willing to terminate the Senate filibuster to pass this act. According to ABC News, Trump argued the 60-vote threshold has to go before Democrats eliminate it themselves. So this isn't just about one bill, it's about restructuring how the Senate works.
That's a huge procedural change. How does the urgency square with what we actually know about non-citizen voting?
That's where it gets complicated. NPR and the New York Times have both pointed out that non-citizen voting is already a federal crime. It's covered under the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996 and also the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. So the legal framework exists, and data from the Government Accountability Office, along with audits from the nonpartisan Brennan Center for Justice, show this kind of fraud is extremely rare.
How rare are we talking?
Vanishingly rare. One audit from 2016 looked at 23.5 million votes and found a suspected non-citizen voting rate of 0.0001%. That's 1 in a million, essentially. But Barr's argument is that the current attestation system, which is basically an honor system where you swear you're a citizen, isn't enough to protect election integrity. So supporters and critics are really arguing past each other on the underlying need for the bill.
Now, Barr was once seen as part of the McConnell wing of the party. How is he handling that connection?
He's trying to distance himself, at least rhetorically. Barr told the Lexington Herald leader at Churchill Downs, and I'm quoting here, that he's, quote, an Andy Barr Republican who supports President Donald Trump, end quote, and that he's, quote, not a Mitch McConnell Republican, end quote. But his history tells a more complicated story. The Washington Examiner and the Wall Street Journal have both documented that his campaign is largely fueled by the McConnell donor machine. Finance reports show max-out contributions from traditional McConnell allies like John Slavic and Alan Franco.
What about his actual voting record? Does that match the Trump branding?
Not entirely, and this is where he's faced criticism from the right. Barr voted to certify the 2020 Electoral College results, which broke with Trump's Stop the Steal efforts at the time. He's also consistently voted with McConnell on various versions of the National Defense Authorization Act, even though Trump publicly opposed certain DEI mandates included in those bills. Insiders told the New York Times that Trump's endorsement likely came after behind-the-scenes lobbying by establishment GOP advisors. They reportedly pitched Barr as a stable alternative to more volatile outsider candidates.
So is the field really cleared? Or is there still a challenger standing?
There is still one notable holdout. Former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron has stayed in the race despite the Trump endorsement. His campaign consultant Brandon Moody told the Chattanooga Times Free Press, quote, "Congrats to Mitch McConnell for getting his guy," end quote. So Cameron's team is explicitly framing this as a battle against the establishment. And Cameron just picked up a significant endorsement of his own that's worth talking about.
Oh, who came in for Cameron?
Senator Rand Paul formally endorsed him. According to WHAS 11, Paul critiqued candidates who act as, quote, rubber stamps, end quote, for national figures. He emphasized that Kentucky needs a senator with, quote, independence of mind, end quote. So Paul's endorsement is really a direct counterweight to Trump's influence. It positions Cameron as the choice for constitutional conservatives and libertarians, and it sets up a genuine ideological contest within the GOP, even if the numbers don't favor Cameron.
Speaking of numbers, where does the polling actually stand right now?
Before the endorsement, an Emerson College and Fox 56 poll had Barr at 28%, Cameron at 21%, and Morris at 15%. Now, with Morris out and his supporters expected to migrate to Barr, plus what people are calling the Trump factor, the math has shifted dramatically. Prediction markets like Kalshi now place Barr's odds of winning the nomination at over 95%. So Cameron is fighting some very steep odds in the final 2.5 weeks.
And what about the general election? Do Democrats have a real shot here?
Realistically, no, and that's the hard truth of Kentucky politics. The leading Democrats include former state lawmaker Charles Booker and former Marine pilot Amy McGrath. But Democrats haven't won a U.S. Senate race in Kentucky since 1992. That's more than 30 years. So most observers view the May 19th GOP primary as the de facto general election. Whoever wins on the 19th is very likely the next senator from Kentucky.
Last question, Chloe. What should our listeners be watching for between now and primary day?
A few things. First, watch whether Cameron can convert the Rand Paul endorsement into actual momentum on the ground, or whether it stays symbolic. Second, keep an eye on the Save America Act conversation, because Barr's filibuster pledge is going to draw national attention well beyond Kentucky. And finally, watch the donor reports, because the McConnell network's continued involvement could become a real liability if Cameron successfully turns this into an establishment versus outsider fight in the closing days.
Fascinating stuff and a lot to track in just over 2 weeks. Chloe, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us this morning.
My pleasure, Grace.
That's our political reporter, Chloe, with the latest on the Kentucky Senate race. We'll have more news right after this. Here are some other headlines. Tehran has served a 14-point peace plan to the United States through Pakistani mediators to lob the ball toward a permanent resolution to the conflict that sparked on February 28, 2026. The Guardian and Middle East Eye report that Iran demands the withdrawal of American forces from the region, the release of frozen assets, and the lifting of the naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Gharibabadi wants a comprehensive deal within 30 days, though Washington had previously fished for a 2-month ceasefire. President Donald Trump is skeptical, remarking that Iran has not yet paid a big enough price to warrant a deal. The proposal seeks de-escalation in Lebanon and war reparations, while proposing a new mechanism for maritime security to keep global energy flows from hitting high water. Nuclear issues are being put on the back burner for later diplomatic seasoning, a move closely watched by Israel, as it secures a multi-billion-dollar fighter jet deal. Shifting to trade, the United States will cough up an estimated $166 billion in tariff refunds starting May 11, 2026. This follows a Supreme Court ruling striking down duties imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act in the case of Learning Resources, Incorporated versus Trump. Judge Richard Eaton has been described as providing a masterclass in judicial clarity, as the new CAPE portal has already processed 21% of entries. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Rodney S. Scott is steering the rollout, while small businesses receive a masterclass in trade volatility. With 330,000 importers eligible, interest is piling up at $22 million daily. While FedEx and UPS promise to pass the savings along, some retailers face lawsuits from consumers wanting a slice of the refund pie. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer is already looking to maintain an America First stance, with fresh investigations under Section 301. In Austria, police have put a lid on a chilling extortion plot that left a sour taste in the region. A 39-year-old man was arrested in Burgenland for allegedly spiking jars of Happy baby food with rat poison. He was hunting for a crypto payout of €2 million, or $2,300,000. The plot went cold for 2 weeks, because the company missed his email. But things heated up when 190-gram jars of carrot and potato puree tested positive for toxins in Eisenstadt. This sparked a recall across Austria, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. Police spokesperson Helmut Marban says 5 jars are recovered, but they are still on a hunt for a 6th contaminated jar. Health Minister Karina Schumann told parents to look for white stickers with red circles on the packaging. President Trump has also signed an executive order turning up the heat on Cuba. The move targets energy and finance, causing blackouts of 25 hours and driving black market fuel to $40 a gallon. Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez called it collective punishment as protesters marched in Havana. With fuel harder to find than a needle in a haystack, the United Nations warns that 80% of Cubans face conditions worse than the 1990s. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is backing the move to cut off fuel after the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Finally, workers are pushing back against the machine. New reports highlight the havoc caused by algorithmic scheduling, which cuts labor costs and worker stability. Nursing apps like ShiftKey are making clinicians bid against each other, turning the profession into a digital auction block. Legislators are trying to pull the plug on automated bosses, with California's No Robot Bosses Act and Connecticut's Senate Bill 435. Amidst this, Acting Secretary of Labor Keith Sonderling has tapped a new team to keep a human eye on enforcement. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.